Welcome, I'm Lee Cowan, and this is Here Comes the Sun, a closer look at some of the people, places, and things we bring you every weekend on Sunday morning. We begin not with President Biden, but Valerie Biden, the first sister, you might call her. She's been behind her big brother almost every step of his political career, and as she tells Norah O'Donnell, she was a force to be reckoned with.
What was the code word that the Secret Service gave you?
Oh, hurricane. I took that as a compliment, that I was a force of nature, but I was a good hurricane.
And how have you been a force of nature for Joe Biden?
I've been a sister. That's what you have at the end of everything. You go to family.
Since age 25, she's led her brother's 7 Senate races.
Can you all hear me? Because I wouldn't want you to miss a word of what I was saying.
And first 2 bids for the presidency. Valerie Biden was the first female presidential campaign manager.
There's more from Norah's talk with the president's sister coming up a little later in the show.
So when someone asked, can Joe Biden win this race for county council in 1970, you replied,
absolutely, he can be president someday. Did I have a master plan that he was going to be president one day? No, but
that was 1970.
What you choose your president on is character. The issues change from the day that you voted for them in November, to the following year. The whole turntable can spin around. So if he wanted to be president, he was absolutely capable of being president. The presidency is about the character of the man and the character of the nation. Mm-hmm. And our nation decided that they wanted to change the character of the occupant of the White House.
Then Maurice Dubois takes us to a museum that will make your mouth water.
Inventor Frederick McKinley Jones made fresh food available to millions.
He came up with an invention that allowed us to have refrigerated trucks.
James Hemings, Thomas Jefferson's enslaved chef, apprenticed in Paris and brought back copper pots, among other things.
Which is how we get that mac and cheese.
And there's Nearest Green, the formerly enslaved man behind Jack Daniel's whiskey.
We thought that Jack Daniels was Jack Daniels, only discovering he was taught to distill by Nearest Green.
That's all coming up right here on Here Comes the Sun. You may not have heard of Valerie Biden Owens, but if you look carefully, you'll find her in the background of almost every significant event in now President Biden's life. While politics was important, supporting her big brother personally mattered so much more. Here's Norah O'Donnell.
I do love in hearing about your own career and your work on the campaigns that you've been described as an iron fist in a cashmere glove.
Oh, that sounds pretty cool. Yeah. I like that. I'll take that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to comment on that? I'll just say thank you.
Yeah.
I better leave it alone.
Valerie Biden Owens may have the message control her big brother Joe sometimes lacks, but that doesn't mean she's afraid to speak her mind.
What was the code word that the Secret Service gave you?
Oh, hurricane. I took that as a compliment, that I was a force of nature, but I was a good hurricane.
And how have you been a force of nature for Joe Biden?
I've been a sister. That's what you have at the end of everything. You go to family.
Family is at the heart of her life story, now a memoir, Growing Up Biden. The book is populated by her parents and 3 brothers, who she calls Jimmy, Frankie, and one who may look familiar, Joey. Since age 25, she's led her brother's 7 Senate races.
Can you all hear me? Because I wouldn't want you to miss a word of what I was saying.
And first 2 bids for the presidency. Valerie Biden was the first female presidential campaign manager.
After years of success, you were often up against people who thought a woman couldn't or shouldn't run a political campaign.
I had it a lot easier than some women because my brother pulled up a chair to the table, which was men. So this is my sister. She speaks for me. What she says, assume that I say it.
My sister really did manage my campaign. No PR firm. My sister managed it for real.
But then I had to go it on my own.
Would there be a President Joe Biden without Valerie Biden?
Oh, sure. Joe is president because he's Joe. And I will always be the president's sister.
That's your Catholic humility.
The campaign that cemented the Biden legend was Joe's 1972 Senate run. His unexpected victory was followed by unspeakable tragedy. A car accident that killed his wife Nelia and 13-month-old daughter Naomi. Sons Bo and Hunter were badly injured.
The president said of you, she has not only believed in me, she helped me believe in myself.
We did the improbable, winning this Senate race by 3,163 votes. And we had this young, promising Democratic star who was now a young widower with his heart ripped out. And he said, the boys cannot get another father. The state of Delaware can get another senator. That's when my belief in Joe was so powerful that he could do both. I said, Joe, you got to do it, because my brother's is about purpose, and he needs a purpose.
The crisis gave new purpose to Valerie, too.
You quit your job, you moved in, you became like a parent.
In spite of the tragedy, it was really a magnificent time. Bo and Hunt were 2 and 3 years old. I remember every day saying, I promise you, Nelia, I'll love them like they're my own.
She eventually married Joe's law school friend, Jack Owens, and has 3 kids of her own, as well as a career as a campaign strategist and advocate for women. Today, at age 76, she chairs the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware, her and her brother's alma mater.
What does the Biden Institute do?
Well, we tried to educate the next generation of young leaders.
We got to stand up and we got to fight.
The 2020 campaign was the first she didn't manage for her brother. It was also the first she didn't want him to enter.
I believed that 2020 would be a bloody battle. The former president would stop at nothing. And the best way to go after Joe would be go after the family.
By the way, where's Hunter?
My expectations were exceeded, but Joe said, I'm doing it.
She writes Joe was the right person at the right time to lead our country.
The campaign had practiced that Vice President Biden wouldn't respond.
Wouldn't take his bait.
He doesn't want
You're a
to answer
senator.
the question.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
would you answer that
because
question?
But then he told him to shut up.
Yeah.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen,
So there's a time and a place, and it was like enough. I was really thrilled. I don't speak for the American people, but I think many of them said, yeah, this is a bully. Stop.
A brighter future.
Plain talk has its place on the campaign trail, but the world focused on 9 unscripted words about Vladimir Putin.
This man cannot remain in power.
Some called it a gaffe, some people called it the unvarnished truth.
First of all, when anybody says Joe's a gaffe is he speaks the truth. Joe had just come from spending the afternoon with moms and their children that have been families destroyed. That's Joe. He knows what grief and that pain is.
Do you want Joe Biden to run for president again in 2024?
Yeah. I think he's the right person at the right time for the right job. So watch us.
He'll be in his 80s.
Watch him.
So why would Joe Biden want to run for president again when he could come back here?
Because he has things still to do.
And he has the stamina to do that.
Yes, he does. Yeah. He's good. It's not easy raising an older brother.
Okay.
More from their chat coming up in just a few minutes. But up next, we set the table for cuisine from some of the nation's biggest food influencers, some of them from decades ago. You might think apple pie is distinctly American, and it is. But apple pie hasn't been around as long as the fare cooked up by some of the chefs Maurice Dubois learned about at the Museum of Food and Drink in New York.
Now we're going to add our beans.
You probably haven't had pork and beans like this, with edamame
I'm going to add our bacon.
and tomatoes.
So this big mama, that's our Berkshire pork shank.
And how's that for a centerpiece?
When you said pork and beans, this is literally not what we were picturing.
So when we first opened, we kind of knew what people's expectations would be on what we were going to do. Black-owned restaurant, you're expecting pork and beans, you're expecting this, and so we let that get them in the doors and then show them this kind of stuff.
At Chris Williams' Houston restaurant, Lucille's, everything from the shrimp and grits to the braised oxtail has an unexpected twist, an approach he calls well-refined Southern cuisine. Are you changing the perception of soul food?
The goal here is to change the limited framing of African American chefs while paying homage to our roots.
Williams says the idea of redefining what it means to be a black chef is wound in his DNA, thanks to his great-grandmother, the legendary chef, educator, and entrepreneur Lucille B. Smith.
And she created the country's first instant hot roll mix. Iterations of that hot roll dough, which are like these chili biscuits right here, were served to American Airlines, their first-class passengers. She broke through the color lines with the brilliance of her product.
Lucille is one of more than 400 black culinary influencers featured in a new Museum of Food and Drink exhibit called African American, Making the Nation's Table. It opened recently in New York City.
We are beginning, and unfortunately only beginning, to understand the enormous, extraordinary hand that African Americans have had in the cooking pots of America.
Culinary historian Jessica B. Harris is the lead curator.
You say that it's more American than apple pie, this African American cooking.
It is. It has been here. It has been the backbeat, the thrum, the hum, and the heartbeat of certainly much of this country.
Harris says enslaved Africans brought to America helped fuel an agricultural revolution.
They planted the crops. They tended the crops. They harvested the crops. They then cooked that, served that. And you're doing all of that for the founding fathers. You're doing all of that for the elite of the country that is beginning to establish what this country's food and foodways are. This fledgling colony's wealth was created by African hands.
You think that's been acknowledged?
It is that thing that's hard to admit.
At the heart of the exhibit hangs a massive legacy quilt. Each block handcrafted to tell a story.
He was a tinkerer.
Inventor Frederick McKinley Jones made fresh food available to millions.
He came up with an invention that allowed us to have refrigerated trucks.
James Hemings, Thomas Jefferson's enslaved chef, apprenticed in Paris and brought back copper pots, among other things.
Which is how we get that mac and cheese.
And there's Nearest Green, the formerly enslaved man behind Jack Daniel's whiskey.
We thought that Jack Daniels was Jack Daniels, only discovering he was taught to distill by Nearest Green.
Also on display, the famed Ebony Test Kitchen. For almost half a century, it sat at the center of black American food culture.
The colors just hit you.
Well,
They're a little
it's
loud.
vibrant and it shows the diversity of the African American audience.
It was often featured in Ebony magazine's cooking column as they tried out new recipes.
What would you do, some pancakes?
You can do pancakes,
Charlotte Draper was the magazine's food editor
grilled fish.
and worked in the kitchen in the 80s.
It's an unbelievable toaster.
Ebony was created as an aspirational magazine to show you can do these things, you can go to law school, you can become a noteworthy entertainer, and you can become certainly a good cook.
Breaking Bread has a way of breaking down barriers. It's a fitting reminder that Chef Chris Williams hopes will bring us together.
Everybody has great memories of these smells, these sensations from back when they were children. And it doesn't matter who you are, we can just have a great experience in the most unexpected places and find common ground.
My brother was my good mentor and then my sponsor.
After the break, more exclusive clips with Valerie Biden Owens. Stay with us. Welcome back. As promised, here is more of Norah O'Donnell's conversation with first sister, Valerie Biden Owens.
You're sometimes referred to as the Biden whisperer.
Correct.
What traits do you think you share with him that make it so easy for the two of you to communicate?
I have 3 brothers, and Mom and Dad were a constant in our lives. But the one who was constant all the time, whose side I was by, was my brother Joe. And when I was 3 years old, from the time I remember, he put out his hand and he said, "Come on, Val." He said, "We've got things to do and places to go and people to see." And we began our journey. So we learned to communicate in an unwritten language. He had a terrible stutter, for example, when he was a kid. I watched this young man who knew what it felt like to be bullied and to be humiliated and to be put in a corner. And I watched how he dealt with that adversity.
How did he deal with it?
When you're a bully, when you've been bullied, you have 2 choices. You can be a bully yourself, which we see, or you can develop empathy. And every life is an incredible act of bravery, you know, every single one. And so it's the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So what Joe did is he practiced and practiced and practiced how to speak, but he was not going to be defined by a bully. He was going to be defined by the principles that Mom and Dad hoped to instill in each of us. I didn't teach him or train him in any way. I told him how brave he was and how strong he was, and I admired him. I mean, with the stutter, you don't say, "Oh, bless your little heart," or you don't finish their sentence for him. I just stood in silent admiration.
Do you have to remind each other of that these days? You know, I mean, when times are tough or when there's bullies, do you remind each other? Remember what Mom said?
It's in the DNA. Yeah, for better or for worse.
I mean, it's interesting because there's empathy, but there's toughness.
Yeah, it's resilience. Dad said it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, it's how quickly you get up. And Mom, I mean, you've probably heard Joe say it. Mom said that failure in everyone's life was inevitable, but that giving up was unforgivable. So it was get up, because you have to keep moving forward. And my brother does that better than anyone.
Growing up, you admired Nancy Drew.
Oh, yeah.
What was it about her that you admired?
Nancy Drew was a smart young woman. She was adventuresome. She had the confidence to reach and risk. And in the small world of Nancy Drew books, she took some big risks. But she was never, she was not a snarky leader. She was always trying to do the right thing. And again, she showed courage.
Because the key to being a leader, in your mind, you write in this book, is confidence.
Yes.
Why do you think that?
I think confidence is the #1 prerequisite for success. I grew up with a brother who told me that I could be anything that I wanted to be. My brother actually told me that I was smarter than he was, that I was better than he was, that I was a better athlete than he was. I mean, I knew it couldn't possibly be true. He was 3 years older and stronger and braver. But I knew that I owed it to him and to myself to try to be that young girl that he thought I was capable of being. My brother was my good mentor and then my sponsor. There's a difference. The mentor says, "Come here, I'll take you under my wing." The sponsor said, "Okay, you're under my wing, but now you're getting out from my wing and I'm throwing you in that pond and you can do this. I'll be here watching you. I can help you and pull you out if you need, but you can do this."
So you've run how many campaigns for your
Well,
brother?
7 U.S. Senate, County Council, 7 U.S. Senate, first 2 presidential nomination, and this was in 2020, was the first time that I didn't actually run. My title was National Co-Chair, I think. But I didn't hang up my spikes. I just put on combat boots to go out and to hit the ground running. And that's what I love. There are plenty of, as you saw, because we won, there are plenty of capable people who did run the campaign. But there was only one sister who could go out and talk to the voters the way that I could about him.
So when someone asked, can Joe Biden win this race for county council in 1970, you replied,
"Absolutely, he can be president someday." Did I have a master plan that he was going to be president one day? No, but
But that was 1970.
What you choose your president on is character. I mean, the issues change from the day that you voted for them in November, to the following year. The whole turntable can spin around. So if he wanted to be president, he was absolutely capable of being president. The presidency is about the character of the man and the character of the nation. And our nation decided that they wanted to change the character of the occupant of the White House.
Why do you think his approval ratings are so low?
Well, again, being a veteran of too many years, the polls go up and down, and so I'm not worried. And I think that to the extent that he continues to talk to the American people about things that matter to them, real bread and butter issues, and the success of the middle class, I think he will fare very, very well.
Mm-hmm. What advice do you give the president now?
I don't give him any advice as such. I'm his sister. But what I do know and what we do talk about is what ordinary American people, which I can speak for, that I'm an ordinary American citizen, what I think. And Joe speaks in plain language. He'll have a policy statement and it sounds like Washington talk. I'll say, wait, what are you talking about? What's that mean?
In fact, you did that during the Bork nomination.
Yes.
You sat around listening to a bunch of legal advisors talk about complex legal policy, and you said, what is this about?
Yes. And Joe, I said, wait a minute, I don't understand. How does it affect me? What Joe has always managed to be able to do is he realizes that the elections, every one of them, they're not about him. They're about me, the voter. So it matters that he speaks directly to the voter, and that's what I'm good for.
I'm Lee Cowan. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you here next time on Here Comes the Sun.